So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Really appreciate it. I was just going to start off by asking, Argyll and Bute Council, you might be aware, they recently declared a housing emergency with the number of homes being built in this region at their lowest number on record and a 15% rise in homelessness. How will the Scottish Government prevent rural housing crisis from getting any worse?
So we very much recognise the need to address the needs of housing in rural Scotland, and the development here in Dunbeg is an amazing example of partners working together. So Scottish Government providing over £35 million with Link Group making a big contribution along with Argyll and Bute and Scottish Water. So partnership working to deliver 300 homes, affordable homes. What a difference it's making to the local community, and the residents I've spoken to are absolutely delighted with the energy efficient homes that they are now living in here. So we need to do more of that. One of the Programme for Government commitments was also about key worker housing in rural Scotland. So money has been set aside to work with local businesses to try and address some of the needs of the hospitality sector and other key sectors in rural Scotland, and we want to find solutions. We know that land availability can be a challenge, we know that topography can be a challenge, but these are challenges to be overcome, and we're really very keen to work with partners to resolve that. We're also working on a rural delivery plan, which is going to bring together the whole of government to look at what more across the board we can do for rural Scotland, including housing.
And I'm sure you'll be aware one of the other big challenges in rural Scotland is, ferries. The kind of struggle there. Many of our readers of the Oban Times and our other newspapers in the area feel a bit let down when it comes to issues caused by, the ageing and kind of unreliable ferry fleet on the west coast. How do you think you'll be able to turn that perception around?
Well, a lot of work. First of all, I do recognise the challenges, and for people who are relying on ferry services, it's very important that they can get a reliable service. So a lot of investment is going on, and there are new ferries that are being procured, and those will be coming online over the course of next year and beyond. We also are supporting Argyll and Bute in terms of the ferries that they run, and we're going to probably be discussing that later with the leader of the council, because we know that it's important that those lifeline ferry services are supported, and of course we make a financial contribution towards Argyll and Bute and the other local authorities that provide ferry services directly themselves, and I'm sure that will be a topic of discussion. We need to make sure going forward that the fleet is replaced, and as I said, the work is ongoing on that. To make sure that we can work towards a far more reliable and robust ferry service.
And it was the recent deadline for the short-term let owners, to submit their applications for the new Scottish Government short-term licensing scheme. I think that was on Sunday, wasn't it? How would you reassure, accommodation owners across the Highlands and Islands who might feel a little bit threatened by the new legislation?
Well, the new legislation is fundamentally about ensuring that basic health and safety standards apply to whatever accommodation someone is using. So that's the core of it. And therefore, we recognise the importance of short-term lets as part of the local economy and the tourism offer across Scotland. That also though has to be balanced with the needs of local communities in terms of housing. And we know that in some areas too many homes are being lost to secondary homes, for example, and to holiday lets, which is why we've also given local authorities the powers to introduce short-term let control areas, different from licensing, but it means that there are additional controls to prevent the further loss of homes to holiday lets, and that is something that other local authorities have looked to use. Argyll and Bute may consider that in the future. It's obviously up to them whether they think that's a tool that they would want to use in areas that are really under pressure for housing, and that so it's for Argyll and Bute to decide whether or not they use that tool, but it is there for them if they want to.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
All right,
I think
no
Sandy,
worries.
you've got a few questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. Okay, I'll try to stand in the same place. Thank you very much. So that sounds good news from what you were saying, is that you're going to meet with Argyll and Bute Council about supporting their new ferry fleet, which is for Jura and Easdale and Ling. So do you want to, if you can, please tell us more about how you're going to be supporting Argyll and Bute Council for their new ferry fleet?
So Argyll and Bute Council, the leaders will be meeting with myself and the First Minister, and I know that that's one of the issues they want to raise along with other issues with us. Discussions are ongoing with all of the local authorities that provide ferries. My predecessor made a commitment to work with the local authorities to look at the needs of the ferry fleet across Scotland going forward, and that's something I'm very, very keen to pursue as well. So part of that will be looking at what the needs are of Argyll and Bute. They're not the only local authority that provide ferry services, but clearly they have some essential ferry services that are important to maintain, and that will be part of the discussion later today.
But basically you're saying there's money available to help Argyll and Bute Council with its new ferries?
Well, money is tight across the whole of the public sector for the Scottish Government and for local authorities. What I'm saying is I want to work in partnership with Argyll and Bute and the other local authorities that provide ferry services to find solutions to the needs. So we already provide funding. I think that this year it's about £1.8 million that the Scottish Government provide to Argyll and Bute, and we provide money across the local authorities that are providing ferry services, but we need to sit down and discuss what the needs of the fleet are going forward. So it'll have to be done in partnership. There's not a lot of spare cash around, but I want to make sure that we work together with the local authorities to find solutions.
Thank you very much. And so we're very lucky here to have the Finance Minister up. Thank you very much. So what I'd like, there's uncertainties around, and people just like to know the truth, and then they can deal with it. Mm-hmm. Why aren't the Scottish Government compensating people for the Calmac ferry disruption?
Well, look, I'm very sorry for any disruption that passengers and local communities have due to ferry disruption. And we have been working with local businesses. For example, I know the Transport Minister has been around over the summer meeting with local communities that have been disrupted, and we'll continue to look at how we do support those local communities and businesses in particular that have felt the brunt of that disruption. I think the solution, though, really lies in what we've just been talking about, and that is making sure that the new ferries that have been procured, that are going to be coming on stream from next year onwards, will help build that resilience in the local ferry networks, and we need to make sure that we keep our foot on the accelerator to help not just the local authorities but the ferry fleet in its entirety, that we make sure that it becomes more robust and more resilient and more reliable.
Sure, absolutely. But I think is that a no to compensation ever, or is it a possible?
Well, as I understand, ministers were talking with local businesses in particular areas that had been impacted. Some areas have been impacted more than others. And the Transport Minister, as I understand, over the summer was having discussions with local businesses, and those discussions will continue. I think the difficulty and the challenge is, what level of disruption would trigger something like that, because clearly some areas have been particularly disrupted, and I think in recognition of that, those are the discussions that have been had.
All right, okay, so there's possible money on the table. It's not a blanket.
Well,
no.
I wouldn't want to raise expectations about money being on the table, because I think that's quite challenging, but those discussions about support to local businesses that have been the most impacted, not all businesses have been impacted the same as others, so we're talking about here local businesses in parts of Scotland that have been particularly impacted, and those discussions will continue.
Thank you. And if I can squeeze in one more, I think we've got okay, sure, absolutely. One of the big things here, as you know, is the Corran ferry, which runs across Loch Linney and is essential for the communities over in Ardnamurchan and the other peninsulas there. The Highland Council is applying to UK Levelling Up Fund for just one ferry. They have two, one and a backup, which may not arrive for years if it's successful. Tunnels are going into Shetland. Why not a bridge for Ardnamurchan?
Well, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to respond with a kind of yes/no answer. I think a lot of work would need to be done on the feasibility of something like that. Clearly, the infrastructure costs of providing a bridge would be substantial, and it would need to be looked at in terms of the infrastructure plan for Scotland. Something that may be raised with your local authority leaders, we are happy to continue to have discussions the infrastructure needs of Scotland generally, but that would be a big project that we would need to consider alongside all the other infrastructure projects. I would make the point that capital budgets for the next few years are being cut by the UK government, so we're seeing less money available for capital and infrastructure projects. So I will have to go back to Parliament as part of the budget process this year to tell Parliament what the projects that will not be going ahead because of those capital reductions. We are also looking at new innovative sources of finance to try and lever in additional private money into infrastructure projects in Scotland. But I wouldn't want to raise expectation around such a big project. A lot of work would need to be done on the feasibility of it.
So they shouldn't feel that there's going to be Scottish Government money coming for a bridge across Loch Linnhe anytime soon. They should not give up on that hope.
Well, I think it would need to go in the mix along with all the other big infrastructure projects that we are committed to already in Scotland. The point I'm making is that we'll not be able to deliver some of those that we're already committed to because of capital budget cuts. The cost of construction, was running at 25% of construction inflation last summer because of the economic shocks that we've seen. All of that's had an impact on our infrastructure programme of building schools, hospitals, roads, bridges. So any additional projects that are a very concept stage would need to be looked at through that lens. But if there's a feasibility study done on it, of course that's something that could be considered in the longer term. But I need to make the point that capital budgets are stretched, and the infrastructure projects that are already in the pipeline, some of those will have to take a lot longer than we would have envisaged.
Deputy First Minister, thank you very much for your time on a windy day.
I know.
Okay, thank you so much.